The first time I saw him, I thought he might kill me. That's not an exaggeration. When you're 100 miles from the nearest town, standing in 3 feet of snow with hypothermia creeping into your bones, and a man the size of a grizzly bear emerges from the tree line carrying an axe, well, your survival instincts kick in fast. But Marcus didn't kill me. He saved me. And that decision, made in the span of a heartbeat on a freezing November afternoon, would change both our lives forever. "You'll take all 15 tonight," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper, and I felt my pulse spike with something that definitely wasn't fear anymore. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Elliot Hayes, and 6 months ago, I was a completely different person. I had a corporate job in Seattle, a studio apartment I could barely afford, and a life that felt like it was slowly suffocating me from the inside out. 23 years old and already burnt out, already hollow. I'd spent my entire life doing what I was supposed to do: good grades, good college, good job, and somewhere along the way, I'd lost track of who I actually was. So I did what any reasonable person having a quarter-life crisis would do. I quit everything, sold what I owned, bought a used truck and a tent, and headed east with no plan except to figure out who the hell Elliot Hayes really was when nobody was watching. Turns out, Elliot Hayes was pretty bad at wilderness survival. The truck broke down in Montana, 2 hours from the nearest mechanic. I'd been camping in national forests, living off protein bars and instant ramen, showering at truck stops, and pretending I was having some kind of transformative spiritual journey. Really, I was just lost. And then the early winter storm hit, and suddenly being lost went from philosophical to life-threatening in about 30 minutes. I tried to hike toward where I thought the main road was, got turned around in the snow. My phone died, my lighter got wet, and as the sun started to set and the temperature dropped below freezing, I realized I might actually die out here, alone, having never figured out a single damn thing about myself. That's when I heard the axe. The sound of metal biting into wood echoed through the forest, rhythmic and steady. I stumbled toward it, my legs numb, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the tree trunks for support. And then I saw him. Marcus Stone was the kind of man who looked like he'd been carved from the mountain itself. 6'4", broad shoulders, arms thick with muscle earned from actual labor, not a gym. He had a dark beard, longer hair tied back, and eyes that were an unsettling shade of gray, the color of storm clouds. He was splitting firewood outside a cabin I hadn't even seen, so perfectly did it blend into the forest. He looked up when I crashed through the underbrush, and for a long moment, we just stared at each other. "Help," I managed to say, and then my legs gave out. I woke up warm. That was the first thing I noticed: warmth, real warmth, spreading through my body like liquid gold. The second thing I noticed was that I was no longer wearing my wet clothes. Panic shot through me, and I sat up fast, clutching a heavy wool blanket to my chest. "Easy," that rough voice again, coming from across the room. "You had hypothermia, had to get you out of those wet things before you lost any fingers." I was in a bed, a real bed, with actual blankets and pillows, in what appeared to be a one-room cabin. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace crackling with heat, simple furniture that looked handmade. And sitting in a chair near the fire, watching me with those storm-gray eyes, was the mountain man who'd saved my life. "Where are my clothes?" My voice came out hoarse. "Drying," he nodded toward a line strung near the fireplace, where my jeans, flannel, and thermal underwear hung steaming. "I left your underwear on. Didn't figure you'd want to wake up completely naked with a stranger." I felt heat rush to my face that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you for saving me. Couldn't exactly leave you to freeze." He stood up, and I was reminded again of his sheer size. Not fat, just solid, built like someone who'd spent their entire life working with their hands. "I'm Marcus. You got a name." "Elliot." "Well, Elliot, you picked a hell of a time to go wandering in the woods. Storm's supposed to last 3 days. You're stuck here till it passes." 3 days trapped in a cabin with a stranger. My heart hammered in my chest, but not entirely from fear. There was something about the way Marcus moved, the calm competence in everything he did, that was magnetic. I watched as he ladled something from a pot hanging over the fire into a wooden bowl. "Can you sit up?" You need to eat something. I managed to prop myself up against the wall, keeping the blanket wrapped around me. Marcus handed me the bowl, some kind of stew, rich and savory, and a spoon. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, and I felt an electric jolt run up my arm. Thank you, I said again, and took a sip. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted, probably because I'd been living on gas station food for 2 months. This is amazing. It's just venison stew, but I caught the smallest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. You're not a vegetarian, are you? Not anymore. I took another spoonful, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Do you live here year-round? Yeah, Marcus sat back down in his chair, watching the fire. Bought this land 5 years ago, built the cabin myself. I come into town once a month for supplies, but otherwise this is home. I struggled to find the word. Isolated. That's the point. His tone had gone flat, and I realized I'd touched on something, some wound I couldn't see. We ate in silence for a while, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the howl of wind outside. The storm was getting worse. Through the cabin's single window, I could see nothing but white. Why'd you come out here? Marcus asked suddenly. You don't look like the outdoorsy type. I laughed, a bitter sound. Is it that obvious? You were wearing canvas sneakers in a snowstorm, so yeah, pretty obvious. I was running away, I guess. I set the empty bowl aside, pulling the blanket tighter around myself. From a life that wasn't working, thought maybe I'd find something out here. Find what? Myself, maybe. I know how cliché that sounds. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel naked all over again. It's not cliché. Plenty of people come to the mountains looking for something. Most don't find it, though. What about you? What were you looking for? Peace, he said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And I found it. Out here, nobody expects anything from you. Nobody judges you. You can just be. There was something in the way he said it, a weight behind the words, that made me wonder what Marcus was running from too. That first night set the pattern for the days that followed. The storm raged on, keeping us trapped in the cabin, and slowly, carefully, we began to learn each other. Marcus was a man of few words, but when he did speak, it mattered. He told me he'd been a carpenter before, working construction in Denver, but the noise and the people and the expectations had worn him down. He'd saved every penny for 5 years to buy this land, and now he lived simply, hunting, fishing, growing what he could in a small greenhouse attached to the cabin, trading furs and woodwork in town for what he couldn't make himself. Don't you get lonely? I asked on the second day, watching him carve something from a piece of wood with a knife that looked razor-sharp. Sometimes. He didn't look up from his work, but loneliness is better than being around people and still feeling alone. That's worse. I knew exactly what he meant. I'd felt that way for years in Seattle, surrounded by coworkers and strangers, but fundamentally disconnected from all of them. At least out here, the isolation was honest. What are you making? I asked, changing the subject. Spoons, I trade them in town. He held up the half-formed piece. People like handmade things, makes them feel connected to something real. Can you teach me? That made him look up, surprise flickering across his face. You want to learn wood carving? I want to learn how to make something with my hands. All I know how to do is type on a keyboard and sit in meetings. Something softened in Marcus's expression. All right, come here. He gestured to the floor beside his chair, and I moved over, still wrapped in one of his flannel shirts and a pair of sweatpants he'd lent me. My clothes were dry now, but his were warmer. He handed me a piece of soft pine and a smaller knife, and then his hands were on mine, getting my grip, showing me the angle to cut. His hands were huge, calloused and rough, but his touch was surprisingly gentle. I could feel the heat of him behind me, smell wood smoke and pine, and something distinctly masculine. My heart was racing, and I had to focus hard on the wood to keep my hands steady. Like this, Marcus murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Let the grain guide you, don't force it. I tried to follow his instructions, but I was acutely aware of every point where our bodies were almost touching. The breadth of his shoulders behind me, the strength in his hands, the rumble of his voice so close to my skin. "You're tensing up," he said. "Relax." Easy for him to say. I felt like every nerve in my body was on fire. But gradually, as I focused on the wood, I did relax. There was something meditative about it, the slow removal of material, the shape emerging from formlessness. We worked in silence for a while, Marcus's hands steadying mine whenever I started to go off course. "You're getting it," he said finally, and there was approval in his voice that made warmth bloom in my chest. "Thanks to you." I glanced back at him and suddenly realized how close our faces were, just inches apart. I could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could count the individual hairs in his beard. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, electric. Marcus's gaze dropped to my lips, and I forgot how to breathe. Then he pulled back, standing up abruptly. "I need to check the firewood." He grabbed his coat and went outside, letting in a blast of freezing air. I sat there on the floor, my heart pounding, the half-carved spoon trembling in my hands. What the hell was that? Marcus stayed outside for almost an hour, and when he came back in, his beard was crusted with ice and his cheeks were red from the cold. He didn't look at me, just busied himself with stacking wood and stoking the fire. I'd retreated to the bed, pretending to read one of the old paperbacks from Marcus's small shelf, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could think about was that moment, the heat in his eyes, the way time had seemed to stop. Was I imagining it? Maybe I was just touch-starved and lonely, projecting onto the first person who'd shown me kindness in months. But no, there had been something there. I was sure of it. The question was, what did I do about it? I'd known I was gay since I was 15, though I'd spent most of my life hiding it. Conservative family, conservative town, conservative everything. I'd had a few awkward hookups in college, one semi-serious boyfriend my senior year, but nothing that really stuck. And I'd certainly never felt anything like this. This pull, this magnetic attraction that made my skin feel too tight whenever Marcus was near. But what if I was wrong? What if Marcus was straight, and I was about to make a complete fool of myself? We were stuck here together for at least another day. It could get really awkward really fast. "You want dinner?" Marcus's voice made me jump. "Yeah, sure." I set the book aside and joined him by the fire. He'd made some kind of fried fish with wild rice, and we ate sitting on the floor with our backs against the bed frame, plates balanced on our knees. The storm outside seemed to have intensified, wind howling like a living thing, but inside the cabin felt safe, protected. "Can I ask you something?" I said, surprising myself. Marcus glanced over. "Shoot. Why'd you really leave Denver? I mean, I get wanting peace and quiet, but there's a difference between wanting some space and completely removing yourself from society." He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he set his plate aside and stared into the fire. "I had someone," he said finally, "a partner. We were together for 3 years, I thought. I thought we'd build a life together, but he wanted me to be someone I wasn't. Wanted me to climb the corporate ladder, make more money, move to a bigger city. Kept pushing me to be more ambitious, more social, more acceptable." My heart clenched at the pronoun. Marcus had been with a man. "What happened?" I asked softly. I finally told him the truth, that I didn't want that life, that I wanted to live simply, somewhere quiet, somewhere I could breathe, and he looked at me like I was insane, said I was throwing my life away, that I was being selfish and irresponsible. Marcus's jaw tightened. We fought, said things we couldn't take back, and then he left. "I'm sorry." Don't be, he was right about one thing, we wanted different lives, but it made me realize I'd been performing for years, being what other people wanted me to be, and I was tired of pretending, tired of shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. He turned to look at me then, and his eyes were raw with an honesty that took my breath away. So I stopped pretending, bought this land, built this cabin. And out here, I don't have to be anything except what I am. I understood him completely. We'd come from different places, different circumstances, but we'd both been running from the same thing, the weight of other people's expectations. I think that's brave, I said, choosing yourself even when it means being alone. Is that what you're doing, choosing yourself? Trying to, I don't know if I'm brave enough yet. Marcus studied me for a long moment. You walked into a blizzard with canvas sneakers and a dream. That's pretty brave, even if it's also pretty stupid. I laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. We spent the rest of the evening trading stories, me about my corporate hellscape job, him about learning to hunt and fish, and all the mistakes he'd made in his early months on the mountain. He had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, making me laugh harder than I had in months. As the night wore on and the fire burned low, I felt something shifting between us. The awkwardness from earlier was gone, replaced by something warmer. Every time our eyes met, I felt that electric charge again. Every time Marcus smiled, a rare thing, but devastating when it happened, my heart did a stupid little flip. I was falling for him, fast and hard and probably catastrophically stupid, given that I was leaving as soon as the storm cleared. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. The storm finally broke on the fourth morning. I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of Marcus splitting firewood outside. I dressed quickly, pulling on my own clothes for the first time in days, and went outside. The world had transformed. Everything was buried under fresh snow, the trees heavy with it, the morning light turning it all gold and pink. It was breathtaking. Marcus looked up when I emerged, axe in hand. Storm's over. Roads should be passable by tomorrow if you want me to drive you to town. Tomorrow, of course. I'd known this was temporary, but hearing him say it out loud felt like a fist around my heart. Right, I managed. That would be great, thank you. Something flickered across Marcus's face, too quick to read, and then he went back to splitting wood. I watched the muscles in his back and shoulders work beneath his flannel shirt, the easy competence in every movement, and felt a deep ache settle in my chest. I didn't want to leave. The realization hit me like a physical blow. 4 days ago, I'd been a stranger stumbling out of a blizzard, and now the thought of walking away from this cabin, from him, felt impossible. But what could I do? I couldn't just stay here. Marcus lived alone for a reason. He'd built this life specifically to get away from people, and I was just some lost kid who'd wandered into his world by accident. He'd saved my life because he was a decent human being, not because he wanted me here permanently. The day passed slowly. We fell back into the rhythm we'd established, me helping where I could, Marcus teaching me small skills, comfortable silences punctuated by conversation. But there was a weight to everything now, an unspoken awareness that this was ending. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed. Marcus had insisted I keep it while he slept in the chair, despite my protests, and stared at the ceiling, listening to his quiet breathing across the room. The fire had burned down to embers, casting everything in a soft red glow. Elliot, Marcus's voice rough with sleep. You awake? Yeah. Can't sleep. No. I heard him shift in the chair, and then his footsteps, and then he was sitting on the edge of the bed. My heart started hammering. What are you going to do, he asked, when you leave here? I don't know, try to get my truck fixed, I guess. Keep wandering, see what I find. And if you don't find anything? Then at least I tried. Marcus was quiet for a moment. In the dim light, his face was all shadows and angles, impossible to read. You could stay. My breath caught. What? Winter's hard up here alone. I could use the help. And you said you wanted to learn how to make things with your hands. He wasn't looking at me, was staring at his own hands instead. It's not much. Cabin's small, life's simple, but if you wanted to stay a while longer, you could. Every rational thought in my head was screaming at me to be careful, to not read too much into this. He was offering me a place to crash for the winter, not a declaration of love. But my heart had other ideas. I'd like that, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'd like to stay. Marcus looked up then, and in the ember light his eyes were burning. You sure? It gets cold, really cold. And it's just me. No internet, no TV, no distractions, just work and wood and winter. I'm sure. I sat up, bringing us face to face, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. Unless you don't actually want me here, if this is just you being nice. I want you here. The words came out rough, almost harsh. That's the problem. I wanted you to stay from the first damn day, and I don't know what to do with that. My heart was in my throat. Marcus, you're young, you've got your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't waste it stuck on a mountain with some hermit who doesn't know how to exist around people anymore. What if I want to be stuck on a mountain with you? The words came out before I could stop them, raw and honest. What if the only time I've felt like myself in years is right here, in this cabin with you? Marcus's jaw worked, like he was fighting some internal battle. His hand came up, hesitant, and his rough fingers brushed my cheek with a gentleness that made my eyes sting. You don't know what you're saying. I do, Marcus, You've been here 4 days. You don't know me. You don't know what you're signing up for. Then let me learn. I caught his hand, held it against my face. Let me stay and I'll learn. Elliot, my name was a prayer and a curse on his lips, and then suddenly his other hand was in my hair and he was pulling me closer, his forehead pressing against mine. I don't want to hurt you. You won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. We stayed like that, breathing the same air, balanced on the knife's edge of something that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I could feel Marcus trembling, could feel the restraint in every line of his body. If you stay, he said finally, his voice low and fierce, you'll take all 15. I blinked, confused. What? 15 harsh Montana winters, 15 years of snow and isolation and hard work, 15 years of me. His gray eyes burned into mine. Because if you stay, I won't be able to let you go. So you need to be sure, Elliot. You need to be absolutely sure this is what you want. 15 years. He was offering me 15 years, maybe forever. The smart thing would be to say I needed time to think about it, to take it slow, to be reasonable. But I'd spent my whole life being reasonable, and it had gotten me nowhere except lost and alone. I'm sure, I breathed, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was nothing like I expected. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fierce, desperate, years of loneliness and hunger pouring into it. Marcus kissed me like I was air and he'd been drowning, his hands tangling in my hair, pulling me closer until I was climbing into his lap, my fingers clutching at his shoulders. He tasted like wood smoke and coffee and something wild, something free. I made a sound in the back of my throat and felt him groan in response, his arms banding around me like he could physically hold me here, keep me from disappearing. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus pressed his forehead to mine again. Stay, he whispered, please stay. I'm not going anywhere, I promised, and kissed him again, softer this time, sealing the vow. The fire had burned out completely, and the cabin was dark, except for the moonlight streaming through the window. We lay tangled together in the small bed, Marcus's chest against my back, his arm heavy and warm around my waist. Tell me something true, I whispered into the darkness. Like what? Anything, something you've never told anyone else. Marcus was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then his arm tightened around me, pulling me impossibly closer. I haven't let anyone touch me in 5 years, he said. Not a handshake, not a hug, nothing. I thought I was better off alone, thought I'd broken that part of myself that needed connection. His lips brushed the back of my neck, making me shiver. And then you stumbled out of a blizzard and ruined everything. I smiled in the darkness. Sorry. Don't be, he pressed a kiss to my shoulder, tender and claiming at once. Your turn, tell me something true. I thought about it, about all the truths I carried, all the things I'd never said out loud. I've never felt like I belonged anywhere, I said finally. Not with my family, not in any city I've lived in, not in any relationship I've tried to build. I've spent my whole life feeling like I was performing, like I was always just slightly wrong for whatever space I was trying to occupy. I turned in his arms so I could see his face in the moonlight. But here, with you, I feel like I fit. Like this is where I was always supposed to end up. Marcus's eyes were bright with emotion. You do fit, perfectly. He kissed me again, slow and deep, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. Like a door I'd been holding closed my entire life had finally swung open, letting in light and air and possibility. We didn't sleep much that night. We talked instead, trading truths and dreams and fears, learning the geography of each other's histories. Marcus told me about his childhood in Wyoming, about parents who never understood him, about years of trying to be normal before finally giving up and accepting himself. I told him about Seattle, about a family who loved me but didn't know me, about the crushing weight of expectations I could never quite meet. Do you think they'll worry, Marcus asked, your family, when you don't come back? Probably, but I'll call them once a month from town, let them know I'm okay. I traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my palm. What about you? Anyone who worries about you? Not anymore. I cut most ties when I moved here. It was easier that way. Lonely, though. Yeah, he caught my hand, brought it to his lips. Not anymore, though. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. I woke to find Marcus already up, making coffee and breakfast, moving around the cabin with quiet efficiency. He looked different in the daylight, still huge and intimidating, but softer somehow, more human. Morning, he said, glancing over with a small smile that made my heart skip. Morning, I stretched, feeling pleasantly sore in ways I'd never experienced before, and padded over to join him. He handed me a mug of coffee, and I wrapped my hands around it gratefully. We should talk logistics, Marcus said, suddenly businesslike, if you're really staying. I'm really staying. Okay, then we need to get your truck fixed, pick up more supplies in town. Winter's coming hard, and we'll need enough food to last till spring. You'll need warmer clothes, better boots, and we should probably tell someone you're here just in case. I kissed him, cutting off the flow of practical planning. When I pulled back, he looked dazed. We'll figure it out, I said, together. That smile again, rare and beautiful, together. 3 months later. The rhythm of mountain life was harder than I'd expected and more rewarding than I could have imagined. Marcus had been right about the cold. January in Montana was brutal, temperatures dropping so low that going outside felt like being stabbed with 1,000 tiny knives. But inside the cabin, warmed by the fire and Marcus's presence, I'd never felt more comfortable. He taught me everything, how to split wood properly so I didn't strain my back, how to ice fish in the frozen lake a mile from the cabin, how to recognize animal tracks in the snow, how to set snares, how to tan hides, how to fix things that broke and make things from scratch. My hands, soft from years of desk work, grew calloused and strong. My body, weak from sitting in office chairs, grew lean and capable. And every night we came back to each other, sometimes fierce and desperate, sometimes gentle and slow, but always with that same fundamental rightness that had been there from the beginning. Marcus was patient with my inexperience, teaching me his body the same way he taught me everything else, with care and attention and genuine pleasure in my learning. We fell into a pattern, wake before dawn, tend to the animals. Marcus kept 3 chickens and a goat that lived in a small heated shelter, check traps, chop wood, cook. Work on various projects. Marcus had a standing order from a shop in town for his carved goods, and I was learning the craft slowly. Read by firelight, talk about everything and nothing, make love, sleep tangled together against the cold. It was simple, it was hard, it was perfect. You happy? Marcus asked one night, watching me across the fire. I was carving a spoon, my 5th attempt, and this one was actually looking decent. Yeah, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Are you? Happier than I've ever been. He said it simply, like it was just a fact. You know that, right? You changed everything. I set the spoon aside and moved to sit beside him, tucking myself under his arm. You changed everything first. You saved my life. We saved each other. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. I was dying out here, even if I was still breathing. You reminded me how to live. 6 months later. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. Wildflowers exploded across the meadows. Birds returned, filling the air with song. And Marcus and I ventured out, exploring the land that was now, in a very real sense, my home too. He took me to his favorite spots, a waterfall that thundered with snowmelt, a cliff with a view that stretched for 50 miles, a grove of aspens that turned golden in the fall. We made love on sun-warmed rocks, surrounded by nothing but wilderness and sky. We talked about plans for the summer, expanding the garden, maybe building a small workshop, definitely reinforcing the cabin's roof before next winter. "I've been thinking," Marcus said one evening, as we sat on the cabin's small porch watching the sunset paint the mountains orange and pink, "about going into town next week." "Okay, we need supplies anyway." "No, I mean, really going into town, not just the trading post." He seemed nervous, which was unusual for Marcus. "There's a guy there, owns the hardware store. He's been trying to get me to come to this thing he organizes, a meetup, I guess you'd call it, for people like us." It took me a moment to understand what he meant. A gay meetup in rural Montana. "There's more of us than you'd think. We just keep quiet about it." Marcus was staring at his hands, that old defensiveness creeping into his posture. "I never went before, didn't want to risk. I don't know, being seen, being known." I took his hand, threaded my fingers through his. "But you want to go now?" "I want us to go, I want to stop hiding. I want," he looked at me then, his grey eyes fierce, "I want people to know you're mine. Is that stupid?" "It's not stupid." My heart was so full it hurt. "I'd love to go, I'd love to meet other people, I'd love to show you off." "Show me off?" He laughed, surprised. "You're hot, Marcus, like objectively, incredibly hot. And you're mine. Hell yes, I want to show you off." He kissed me then, deep and thorough, tasting like happiness. The meetup was at a small brewery on the edge of town, a deliberately inconspicuous place that nonetheless had pride flags subtly incorporated into the decor. There were maybe 20 people there, ranging from a couple in their 60s to a few guys around my age, and everyone was kind. They welcomed me with genuine warmth. They teased Marcus about finally bringing someone around, about the hermit coming down from his mountain. They asked about our life, our plans, and when Marcus put his arm around me, casually claiming, nobody blinked. It was just normal. "You're good for him," the hardware store owner Jim told me while Marcus was at the bar getting drinks. He was a burly man in his 50s with kind eyes. "I've known Marcus for years. He was hurting bad when he first moved here, but you made him smile again." "He saved my life," I said. "Sounds like you saved each other." Jim clapped me on the shoulder. "Welcome to the mountains, kid. We're glad to have you." When we drove back to the cabin that night, both of us a little buzzed from beer and connection, Marcus kept glancing over at me. "What?" I finally asked. "Nothing, I didn't know I could have this. Both things, the peace of the mountains and someone to share it with. I thought I had to choose." "You don't have to choose, we can have both." I reached over, took his hand. "We can have everything, Marcus." He brought my hand to his lips, kissed my knuckles. "Yeah, we can." 1 year later. The first snow of the season was falling, big fat flakes that caught in Marcus's beard as we stood outside the cabin. We'd spent the day preparing, wood stacked to the roof, supplies laid in, everything battened down for winter. Our second winter together. I still remembered that first snowstorm, remembered stumbling through the forest convinced I was going to die. Remembered the sight of Marcus emerging from the trees like some kind of wilderness god. Remembered thinking he might kill me, and then thinking he might save me, and never imagining he might do something even more impossible, might love me. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, slipping his arm around my waist. 15 winters, remember, this is only number 2. He smiled against my hair. 13 more to go. And then 13 more after that, and 13 more after that. He turned me in his arms, snow falling around us like a benediction. "Forever, Elliot, that's the deal. You take all 15, and I'll give you forever." I kissed him, tasting snow and promise and the wild freedom of the mountains. Deal. We went inside, into the warmth and the light, into the life we'd built together from nothing but hope and stubbornness and love. Outside, the storm gathered strength. Inside, we had everything we needed. 5 years later. Tell me again, I said, watching Marcus work. We'd built the workshop 2 years ago, and now it was filled with his carvings, not just spoons anymore, but bowls and boxes and even furniture. His work had gotten popular enough that we actually made decent money from it. Tell you what, he looked up, saw me leaning in the doorway, and smiled that private smile that was just for me. How I stumbled into your life and ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything, you saved it. He set down his tools and crossed to me, pulling me into his arms. Best day of my life, the day you nearly froze to death on my mountain. Romantic. I'm a romantic guy. He kissed me slow and sweet. Love you, Elliot. Love you too. Through the workshop window, I could see our expanded cabin. We'd added a room, put in better windows, even installed solar panels for limited electricity. I could see the garden beds, dormant now under snow, but which would explode with vegetables come summer. I could see the life we'd built, piece by piece, day by day. I'd come to these mountains looking for myself, lost and desperate and alone, and I'd found so much more than I'd ever dreamed possible. I'd found purpose, I'd found peace, I'd found home. I'd found Marcus. And 15 winters, that was just the beginning. The end. Did this story touch your heart? Hit that like button and subscribe to never miss a story about love, courage, and finding yourself in unexpected places. Drop a comment below. Should I tell you what happened during their 10th winter together? There's a story there that'll make you cry happy tears. Blue heart. Thank you for reading this journey of two souls finding each other against all odds. Remember, love is love, and sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most beautiful forever. Stay tuned for more stories that celebrate authentic connection and the courage to choose yourself. Red.